And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a late Friday evening, late Friday evening. It's been that long of a week. My days are running together. But we saw a big trade today. I told you guys we would go live if there was a big trade for Pablo Lopez. Told you we'd go live if there was a big trade for Luis Arraez. And boom, we have both. Luis Arraez is traded from the Minnesota Twins in exchange for Pablo Lopez and 2 prospects. Now, the Miami Marlins gave up a hefty price for this one. They gave up a top 5 prospect in Jose Salas. They also gave up a younger prospect as well, Byron Churio. He goes into that Twins prospect system. But the big piece for them is they get the starting pitcher they wanted. They wanted an ace-level starting pitcher at the outset of this offseason. Pablo Lopez does not qualify as that. That's why they're getting the extra pieces in this deal from the Marlins as well. He's more of a number 3 starter on an average day when he's really good. He's more of a low-end number 2 starter in any team's rotation. But Pablo Lopez does go to the AL Central Minnesota Twins. Now for the Miami Marlins, Luis Arraez is going to be the everyday second baseman for them. He won the AL batting championship as far as batting average last year for the Minnesota Twins. The only major offensive category that Aaron Judge did not win last year was won by Luis Arraez. So he is a very good, very dynamic hitter at the plate, and he does exactly what the Miami Marlins need. They needed somebody to have some type of spark in that offense Their pitching staff has been very good for the past couple of years. They have Sandy Alcantara at the very top of that lineup, or at the very top of that rotation. They brought in Johnny Cueto to give them some extra depth. Should they make a move for Pablo Lopez? I speculated about that in that video a couple of weeks back. You can check out that full breakdown video of the Johnny Cueto signing on our YouTube page at the Upside Sports Network here on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN. But as far as Pablo Lopez, as I mentioned, kind of a high-end number 3 starter, a low-end number 2, if you will, in a rotation. But Luis Arraez for the Marlins is what they needed. They've struggled to develop position player talent for pretty much the last 10 years, and so they've really had to get somebody in-house who's going to be able to take the ball and run with it, and just to get some type of offensive momentum going forward. Give them some type of positive juice in that locker room, because right now, just the odor of failure on that on that lineup right now has been hanging around for pretty much the last 3 years, and so bringing in Luis Arraez should hopefully jumpstart a lot of those other bats in the lineup, take up some of that pressure from them, and say, hey, we got somebody here who can really hit. Now you guys can take a little bit of pressure off yourselves, relax, and just do what you do, and go out there and be yourself as a hitter, and not try to do too much. And that's what seems to have caused the Miami Marlins to play a little bit worse than what they probably should have the last couple of years offensively, so he should help alleviate some of those issues. Now, the one thing for the Marlins is they have a ton of pitching prospects on the way as well. They have a really good, dynamic young pitcher. I want to say his last name is Perez, Jose Perez in that minor league system. He is looking like a very good, very high-end starting pitcher once he does reach the big leagues. They're trying not to rush him up to the big leagues. That's why signing like Johnny Cueto doesn't force them to rush him up. Remember a while back anyway, they brought up a guy named Jose Fernandez. May he rest in peace, unfortunately. But he was a very fine pitcher for them, and really gave them really got the ball rolling for them at the beginning of their title window in the early 2010s. They had the lineup full of Christian Yelich, the Marcelo Zunas, the Giancarlo Stantons, that team. Jose Fernandez was the ace of that roster, and just when he unfortunately passed, they just really had nothing left in that starting rotation to really build off of, and so they just realized the writing was on the wall. It's time to trade Yelich, it's time to trade Ozuna, it's time to get rid of Giancarlo's big contract, and they just tore it all down. And this seems to be the next window of contention for the Marlins here in the next year or two. Once those starting pitchers start to come up to the big leagues, like Perez, I want to say his last name is, and Alcantara, they have a really good 1-2 eventually. And then hopefully some of their other young starters that have shown promise in the big leagues can continue to develop and become that next big starter in their rotation. Jesus Luzardo is another name that's been on the trade block so far this offseason. We'll see if he ultimately is moved. I think this might be the only move that they make right now, just because I don't think they want to completely gut that rotation right now. I still think they want to at least have a very good rotation, and Jesus Luzardo could eventually blossom into that next Pablo Lopez on their roster, but we'll have to wait and see if that will happen. But for the Miami Marlins, they get the position player they absolutely had to have in Luis Arraez. For the Twins, their offseason quite a bit different than it looked a few weeks ago. Would have put the Minnesota Twins as probably one of the 3 worst off seasons in all of Major League Baseball, behind the Giants and Red Sox. However, Twins, of course, the change of course anyway, with Carlos Correa, put him back in Minnesota. Very good deal for him. 6 years, $200 million with 4 vesting options thereafter that could make the deal $270 million total. And then now they add another starting pitcher. There's rumors out there that they could go with a 6-man rotation to start the year. I know a lot of teams sometimes will start with a 4-man rotation just because of the few games at the beginning of the schedule, and then they'll go to a 6-man really quickly, just kind of stretch out their arms and not overuse them. But the Twins could legitimately have 6 starting pitchers in their rotation all year long. We'll have to see which way they go, but they had some depth as far as position players. They traded from that depth by giving away one of their top pieces in Luis Arraez. Now, the one interesting nugget that you may not be aware of if you're a Minnesota Twins fan or a baseball fan in general, he is the Minnesota Twins have been the only team to ever trade American League batting champions who ever won their league in batting average. They did so with Rod Carew in 1978, and now they do the same here with Luis Arraez. Let us know in the comment section what you think about the trade overall. Was it enough for the Miami Marlins to be able to, get Luis Arraez to give up that package of prospects for the Twins? Was Luis Arraez the right move? We heard rumors out there that they could have traded Max Kepler among other prospects to get the deal done. Instead, they opt to go ahead and trade one piece to get three back anyway. And while Pablo Lopez is a very good starting pitcher, you have to really hope Salas really pans out. But they have some really good middle infield prospects coming, including Royce Lewis, including Brooks Lee as well. So they have some depth as far as that shortstop spot is concerned. That's now going to be taken by Carlos Correa. One of those guys could now be moved over to second base. I'd imagine Royce Lewis could be the first candidate for that spot long term, but they do have some good position players already available on the Major League roster to kind of fill out that lineup for next year. Remember, they brought in Joey Gallo this offseason. They brought in Christian Vasquez to kind of play that outfield and catcher roles respectively. They, of course, still have Byron Buxton. They have Celestino as well. They have Kirilloff. They have Miranda. Larinich as well. They've got to have some at-bats available for these players, and Arraez has been used all over the diamond in Minnesota, as it wasn't like he was their he wasn't like he was at second base exclusively all year long last year for them. He played a little bit of first base, moved all around the diamond, third base. I want to say he played some left field as well. And so Minnesota is one of the few teams that's capable to withstand losing one of their best offensive weapons on their roster. But, of course, now they have Buxton to rely on, they have Correa to rely on, and they're both going to be there for an extended period of time because both are now signed to long-term deals. Now, will both be healthy enough is the question. Are the Twins going to have enough firepower in that rotation to get it done? Will that bullpen continue to get a little bit better? Duran was in his first year last year, but he was lights out for them. Can he take another step this year and take over that closer role exclusively and become the next great dominant closer in Major League Baseball? That could be a realistic possibility for them. Are the Twins done? Are they still looking to try to make a trade for Corbin Burnes? Do they still have the ammunition to get it done? I think they would still love to bring in an ace-level pitcher, don't get me wrong. They could package Pablo Lopez, turn around and package another starting pitcher in another deal for a starting pitcher. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this is pretty much the final move for the Twins right now. They could add another piece here and there, a minor league deal here or there. But for all intents and purposes, they've added their starting rotation, they added their bullpen, or they're added to their outfield, and they brought back Carlos Correa. That was the important check boxes that they had to do this offseason, in addition to catcher, of course, and they did so. Welcome in, Mr. Gaming. If the Twins could have traded Kepler instead of Luis, then they must really love the Marlins prospects, possibly, or they just didn't want to give up their own. Got to think Kepler, his price right now in the open market wasn't very high because he hasn't been as effective in about 3 years now. His greatest season, I want to say, was 2019. It's been a while since Kepler was thought of as that grade A prospect. And while he still has it in him, kind of that five-tool guy, can hit for power, can hit for average, can really defend, has some speed to him, good arm in right field. While he's got all the tools, he's never really put it together ever since that season. That's why I imagine his price was significantly lower. So if they were to make a trade for Pablo Lopez with Max Kepler, I'd imagine they'd have to include some decent prospects in return. By including Luis Arraez, they keep Kepler. If Kepler does get back into that winning form, maybe they can benefit from that. Then you got to also imagine maybe they can spin off Kepler as well in another deal to get something else they want at the trade deadline, maybe a bullpen arm, whatever they decide to do. But Kepler is still going to be sought after by other franchises who are still looking for outfield help. I know the Texas Rangers are still looking for a left fielder, among several other teams. The New York Yankees as well could use a contact-hitting left fielder. Kepler doesn't really fit that mold, but any team that's looking for outfield help right now, the market's starting to get a little thin. Jurickson Profar is the top option out there, but he's been out there for a while now. He's expected to get probably north of $10 million a year. I'd expect at least a 2-year, maybe even a 3-year deal for him to sign somewhere, and he's looking for a raise off of what he got from the Padres last year. He's a very good, versatile defender. He's not going to be poor at any spot that you put him on the diamond, but he's not exactly knocking the cover off the ball either. He's about a 240 hitter last year, I want to say, and that was a really good year for him. Obviously not a really good year for, say, like Aaron Judge, but not everybody is Aaron Judge, so you have to get some productivity. But Jurickson Profar essentially is what's best on the market right now as far as free agency. Trade's a little bit more difficult. That's a little bit more difficult to read from the outside looking in. Most of the big trades we've already seen this offseason, but we could still see a few more. Now that the Pablo Lopez deal is done, we could see other teams move some of their depth at starting pitcher as well. Texas Rangers are one of those teams that now has plenty of depth at that starting pitcher spot. They have a hole at the closer spot and in left field. They could spin off a guy like Jake Odorizzi, who they acquired from the Atlanta Braves anyway. He's only got a $2.5 million contract right now that's being paid for by Texas. The other 10 is being paid by Atlanta. So a team that wants a very good innings eater type pitcher could ask for Jake Odorizzi or go after a Dane Dunning, who's coming off of hip surgery, but is still very effective as well. Hasn't necessarily reached his ceiling yet that we all thought he could, but maybe if the Rangers decide to hold on to him, they could shift into the bullpen and see what he has out of that. But there's a lot of teams out there that have some depth at starting pitching. Looking at the Seattle Mariners, they have a couple of starting pitchers that they could move, including Marco Gonzalez. There's a lot of teams out there that have that still have needs for starting pitchers, and we'll see if we start to see that market go now that the Pablo Lopez deal has finally gone down. But appreciate you guys joining us here tonight. We will be live for you guys again on Monday, giving you guys the weekly breakdown of what's happening around Major League Baseball, the Hot Stove Report, and we will be still doing our live daily updates for you guys on the NBA trade deadline. That will happen for you guys daily, weekdays, Monday through Friday anyway, at 9 o'clock. So make sure you tune in, hit that subscribe button, and like this video. It really does help us out. Can't tell you guys how much it really does help us. And thank you guys for joining us for 2 of our lives here this evening. You guys can check out a lot of our breakdown videos that we'll be having coming out for you over the weekend. And thank you guys for joining us here tonight. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to send them to us. If you have a proposed trade, I know a lot of you guys out there are trying to think of how to improve your team now that the majority of the free agents are done. You guys can check out baseballtradevalues.com, kind of put together a comparable trade package, something that actually makes sense for both teams, by the way. And if it's a good enough one, we'll go ahead and send it to us. We'll see if we can kind of, what your thought process was there and see if it's a trade that should go down for both teams. Remember, here at the Upside, we like to look at the next step in the sports storyline. So now that we've seen the trade for Luis Arraez and Pablo Lopez, what's next for the Twins? What's next for the Marlins? Marlins have been in on a lot of different things over the past couple of weeks, including Jurickson Profar, Aroldis Chapman, Pablo Lopez, obviously now being traded for Luis Arraez. Max Kepler they were in on as well as part of that Pablo Lopez trade at one point, so maybe they could go out there and add another outfielder. Seems that they have some hunger to bring in one. However, they are moving Jazz Chisholm to center field. He's already said, hey, I'm going to be an all-star center fielder this year, so we'll see if that happens. Once a highly touted prospect, and now that finally they have somebody they can rest their hat on and say, this is a good offensive player, relax, stay in your lane, do what you do best. Players like Jazz Chisholm might start to play a little bit better, not put too much pressure on themselves, and Luis Arraez does a lot of good things for that Miami Marlins team. Let us know who you think won the trade. At this point, it's a little too early to tell, but just looking at the surface of it, Twins go with the better player in Luis Arraez, flip him in exchange for a starting pitcher with control, which is something not very many teams can pull off without trading multiple assets. They did it by only trading one asset. They also added to their prospect pool. By the way, that Marlins top 5 prospect, Jose Salas, he slides in at number 13 on MLB.com's rankings anyway for the Minnesota Twins prospects. Tells you the depth of the Minnesota Twins farm system. Tells you also that they could have some young guys coming in the next few years. Just looking at their top few prospects right now for the Minnesota Twins, they've got a couple of them that are around the Major League ready stage right now. Wallner, an outfielder. Brooks Lee is in Double-A. Royce Lewis was on the Major League roster last year. But, of course, he has his own injury issues to worry about. They have Simeon Woods Richardson. He came over in the Jose Barrios deal from the Toronto Blue Jays. So they've got some openings that are about to come up in that roster. And so maybe we could see them deal from that Major League roster once again as they round out their team before spring training. But let us know what you think of the trade overall. Later on, of course, say in a year or so, we'll see who ultimately won the deal. Is Luis Arraez still the batting champion, still able to lead the entire league as far as batting average? Maybe. Does that Miami Marlins team get a little bit better productivity out of that lineup? Possibly. And, of course, with that starting rotation, with the control that they have of Pablo Lopez and the other starters in that rotation, Are they able to continue and build off of that? Does Pablo Lopez eventually become the ace that the Twins were looking for? Those are things that we're going to have to examine here at the Upside, and we'll keep you guys up to date on everything Major League Baseball, or from Major League Baseball's hot stove, from the NBA trade deadline. NHL trade deadline is about a month and change away, and of course the NFL playoffs. We got some games this weekend. Cowboys face the 49ers. We got the Bills and Bengals game, the one that was canceled in the regular season. They now meet in the playoffs in Buffalo, and should be a very good game. Kansas City plays Jacksonville. Four of the top five quarterbacks in the NFL, in my mind, the future of the quarterback position anyway in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow are all in the AFC, and all four have made it to that stage of the playoffs. On the NFC side, we mentioned the Cowboys facing the 49ers. The Eagles face the Giants. If the Giants, a division rival of the Eagles, are able to overcome the Eagles, they're obviously considered a heavy favorite, the Eagles are. If they're able to overcome them, which is entirely possible, division rivals do pull off surprising upsets with regularity. So we could see some real surprises on the NFC side, but the AFC is where the real talent is so far this year in the NFL. I expect one of the AFC teams to ultimately come out on top in the Super Bowl, but it's not to say that you shouldn't watch. These games should be very fascinating. Cowboys and 49ers harkens back to the days in the 90s when the Cowboys were facing the 49ers in the playoffs, what seemed like every single year, renewed the rivalry the last couple of years. Last year, Dallas lost at home in the playoffs to the 49ers. This year, Dallas is hoping to return the favor in San Francisco. But let us know what you guys think as far as the trade for Arraez and Lopez, what the NBA trade deadline is going to look like, NHL trade deadline. We mentioned, of course, that Kevin Hayes and Provorov are going to be available for the Flyers. We got some news on the market for Bo Horvat of the Vancouver Canucks. He's been on the market pretty much since around late November, and it seems like his market is starting to peak up, especially with him heading into free agency. Brock Besser as well from the Canucks is expected to be available. We'll see who ultimately is traded. We mentioned Chikrin from the Arizona Coyotes. He is expected to be traded as well for a couple of first-round picks. Coyotes have struggled to get that centerpiece of their franchise, that forward that's able to score 30 goals a season, 40 goals a season, that 100-point producer. They haven't really had that so far. They've had some good defensemen. They had Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They had Chikrin. They've had some good veterans in there over the years. Yarmolson, Goligoski. But it seems like it's just time for the next phase of Coyotes hockey. But again, let us know what you think of the trade. Send us any comments or questions on any of our videos, and we really appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Y'all have a great weekend, and keep your eyes peeled for any of the videos that we'll have coming your way, covering both the trade here for Lopez and Arraez and any other big trade that goes down in the NBA or the NHL. Y'all have a great evening.